Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can all see me and hear me okay. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of music that we had to welcome you all to this evening. It's just gone 6, so I think we're going to get going. Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening as we turn our attention to the history of music at Radley College. Just a couple of weeks ago, we celebrated the opening of the new music school here at the college, a project that's taken over 18 months and 65,000 bricks. The music school has an expanded concert hall, performance spaces, and plentiful individual practice rooms, which it was desperately in need of. It's a beautiful and impressive space, and I do hope that those of you who can will have a chance to see it at some point soon. Music has always been at the heart of Radley life, and this is still very much the case. It was impossible for us to schedule this event tonight without clashing with some form of musical rehearsal, performance, or competition. And tonight in Silk Hall, the Gun Cup is taking place. I'm sure some of you will remember that very well. So just before we begin, a few housekeeping notes for you. We very much want to hear from you. That's the most important. So please do chip in with your memories and stories. Really at any moment. You can raise your hand in person. We'll keep an eye out for you. There's a raise hand button, I think, at the bottom somewhere. And there's also a chat function. So if you want to pop anything in there, a question or a comment, please do. If you're not speaking, it'd be great if you could keep your microphone on mute. That's just to help us reduce the interference on the call and make sure everyone can hear everything well. And finally, this event is being recorded. That's because we want to make it available on our website and YouTube for the people who couldn't attend tonight. Oh, I am absolutely delighted to hand you over to Clare Sargent, our college archivist. Over to you, Clare.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. As you know, music is at the heart of Radley, and for all of you, it has been at the heart of your experience of the school. So one of the things that we wanted to do as part of this, this is one of our series of a kind of informal oral history that we're creating about different topics within the history of the school. And it seemed really appropriate to look at music with the opening of the new music school. We're calling it a new music school, but actually, as you'll see, it's very much the music school that you all know and are very familiar with, clad in a new brick structure. So we'll have a look at some of the pictures of that. Hopefully we will be joined as well briefly by Sam Gladson, who is the current presenter, who is going to join us live from the Gun Cup in between the few moments he has in between the festival class and the finals. So he will talk a little bit about some of the things that they've been doing in music most recently. This is a then and now. So we're going to be looking across time at all sorts of different periods and genres. And one of the things that I've had while trying to put this together and to keep it even vaguely within a time span that is reasonable, there's going to be an awful lot that is missed out, a lot that is briefly touched on. But as Sophie has already said, this is really your event, not ours. I'm going to just sort of burble and talk about various things. But we're going to have a lot of illustrations, and they are all there to prompt chat, to prompt discussion and memory. And you can be just whatever comes to mind, talk about it. We've been gathering some quotes as we've been putting this together, and we have quite a few which seem to us to be very meaningful, and I've incorporated those into the presentation as well. If it happens to be your quote, again, just put your hand up, chat, and expand it a little for us. If it's your part of history, then also it's something that we really want to hear more about. I am not a musician, and therefore I'll try to keep it right, but I am not a technical musician. I unfortunately, my violin teacher and I abandoned the whole project very early on in the process. We both felt it was the better thing to do. So I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to talk through images that come up. But as I say, keep an eye on on the moment where you want to just join in with us. So I'm going to share my screen now. Right. So the music that you heard as we played was a prompt from Peter Vickers of 1973, E-Social, about Jazz 3. One of the things that we have is that where I have a recording that we can have digitized, they are actually available on the digital archive. So you have got we can send through the links for those and you can follow up on it. There are one or two things that have been mentioned by people which we have not got a copy of. So I need a certain amount of looking through, rummaging through attics to find one or two things that have been requested. And I'm going to start with what I thought was a beautiful quote from Charles Stokes, 1963, about how that enduring love of music was a great gift. And actually, it's vital to Radley that that love of music is there. I'm sure you all know that one of the four founders of Radley College was Edwin Monk, who was composer, uh, organist, involved in the Anglican hymn book. And a part of the reason why he was involved right at the very beginning was because of the college's links to the Oxford movement, which placed sacred choral music right at the heart of services. One of the things that he did as part of that, as precentor, was to set up the servitor scheme, whereby a number of boys were paid not to be pupils at the school, but to work their passage, as it were, doing all sorts of tasks around the school, but they were then trained in choral music to form the choir. And part of that was to train them so that they could then go off into an evolving tradition of choral music across the whole country in cathedrals, major churches, as the Oxford movement was developing and moving on. So they were trained in singing anthems and so on. One of the earliest visitors to the school was Sir Frank Ouseley, and the earliest music prize is actually called the Ouseley or Ouseley Prize. He went on from visiting Radley, seeing the new organ here and so on, to founding a college specifically as a music school, as a choir school in Tenbury. Also key to that beginning of the school was the organ, which was built by Telfords of Dublin. It was considered to be the largest organ they had ever built, a major structure. They were so proud of it that actually having brought it across to Radley in about 1848 and put it into what you can see here, which was our temporary first chapel, the old chapel, it was actually dismantled and taken back to the Dublin exhibition in 1853. So moving an organ of that size backwards and forwards across the country, you can imagine what it was like. And actually, as an organ, it suffered all sorts of vicissitudes. George Wharton, as precentor, who, again, you will all know as the longest serving precentor, was constantly tinkering with it, constantly changing things. There was a point in 1889 where he actually had it powered by a Crosley hydraulic gas engine. There is also one, I gather, under Abingdon Town Hall. And that is probably the only surviving one of those in the country. That he was constantly making this organ, changing it, and trying to make things work. But I think one of the things is that they're part of that very early tradition. So choral music, absolutely central. Edwin Monk left Radley in 1859 and went to become precentor of York Minster. He was actually joined there by Robert Singleton, who was our first warden. Between them, they collaborated on the Anglican hymn book while there at York. But actually, it was very notable that Edwin Monk's love of Radley was such that when he retired from York Minster, he came back to Radley, bought a house, newly built house in the village, and he and his wife lived there until he died. But the servitor system very slowly devolved into actually a point where we had enough boys in the school to form its own choir. This is the earliest photograph we've got of the choir. Here they are in 1863. And you can see that they're, as always, very little boys. At this time, children as young as 8 came to the school. There was no sort of age defining as to who came. You've got Wharton sitting right in the middle of his choristers there, and here he is also actually sitting at the console of the Telford organ in a little bit in later life. That one. But what we have recently, this quote from David Noble, is that we now have the Bastian Scholarship for organs, organ music, which is really lovely. I know we've given this a couple of times now, and I believe the first holder of the Bastian Scholarship was Henry Morris, who has gone on now to be organ scholar at one of the Oxford colleges. Don't quote me on that. I ought to know better. But it's interesting that David Bastian himself is not a musician, but actually affected so much by the music that he actually donated that organ scholarship. But what we also then have, as the school has developed, it's now obviously for a century or so, it's been boys from the age of 13 to 18. And one of the issues that has arisen is that boys' voices are breaking much younger, much older, younger, definitely younger, which meant that it was very difficult to maintain a treble line. And so we ended up with the chorister scheme, which was introduced in 2003 by Stephen Clark, working with Tim Morris, the Suck Centre as well. And I know that Stephen is on the call. I don't know if you'd like to say anything briefly, Stephen, about the chorister scheme.
Well, good evening, everybody. Yeah, it was. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was an idea that I'd only arrived in Radley at 2002, and I'd love to claim absolutely full credit for the whole thing, but that would be not quite true. It was an idea that had been around, I think, for a few years, and I think Angus, who is, I think, also on this call, was completely behind it, and I suppose it just took me to push it over the edge and actually make it reality. And in fact, Tim Morris, the Centre, and the only way we knew about the only thing really we knew about running boys' choirs was what we had learned as choristers ourselves, which was in Oxford at New College specifically. And we felt there was going to be if you like, we had a need for it at Radley because we wanted to develop the singing and enlarge the choir. And it gave us a wonderful way to have a secure top line. But there was also the fact that we felt there was a kind of gap in the market in Oxford. So there were at that point the three colleges in Oxford, but they were completely all engrossing schemes that were all or nothing. And we wanted to do something that was of a less commitment to the boys. But on the other hand, it was rigorous. And so we expected the boys to work hard, and we gave them theory tuition, and we expected them to progress. And the whole thing was very structured. And we found it was pushing on an open door. There were lots of families who wanted to commit to it. And I have to say, of all the things I have done in my life, I think this is the one that I would feel most satisfied that I really helped created something that changed boys' lives. I mean, I had boys, not boys anymore, but I remember one particular boy who was an early, in the first couple of years, and he was really struggling with behavior and concentration. And it was quite a broken family he came from, and it was all sorts of things going on. But, you know, I really felt there was something there, and we pursued it. And wind forwards, I remember getting a text message from him, age 19, just saying, "Oh, Mr. Clark wanted to say I'm just off to Sweden to sing in the chorus, professional chorus of Peter Grimes at whatever. And there were other boys too whose lives had been changed by what we were able to do at Radley. And Tim and I knew very well the special setup we had of not only the wonderful chapel, but also the hall, the fact that Angus and the whole school was behind the scheme. we were in actually quite a privileged position to make something really special work. And I was so delighted that Sam, one of the reasons he was interested in coming to Radley was because of our chorusship scheme, and he has taken it on in wonderful ways, and the whole thing is progressing superbly. And I love to look back at it, and lovely looking at these photos of boys in the early scheme. I know exactly who each of them is just by looking at them. But anyway, that's enough for me.
Sam, are you there? Not yet. Angus, would you like to expand a little on this?
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I mean, I'd absolutely concur with all that Stephen said. I think one of the things I might add is that I think people often talk about the difference between the independent and the state sector. But when we went initially to talk to those in the Oxfordshire music department, they could not have been more welcoming and enthusiastic about the idea, which was great. It was hugely supported. And in a small story, I was walking through the shopping precinct in Witney just about a week ago when one of the choristers' mums came up to me, Peter Norris's mum, and again just talked about all the impact that scheme had on him. So I think, yeah, I would agree with Stephen. I think it was absolutely one of the most rewarding things in my time at Radley. Yeah.
Yes, I believe Peter Norris went right the way through the school, didn't he, as a musician and into university?
I saw Peter quite recently, actually. I was working in our only opera house that's left now, and he came to the dress rehearsal looking tall and successful. He was great mates with one of the singers we had on the stage, so he's very much very wedded to his singing still. It's lovely to see boys all the way through from, what was he, 7 or 8, I think was one of our first choristers, and sticking all the way through. And he was by no means the only one. There are many others, and there are others who have gone through the scheme who have not become singers or musicians, but have loved it and have been changed by it. It's not just about music; it's about so many other transferable skills.
Yeah.
Right. And Sam, we're just talking about the choristers. Are you there to talk to us now about some of the things that you're doing with music?
Yes, I'm here. Hello. Nice to see everyone. I believe you're there. I can't see your faces, but I'm lovely to see you. I've just you'll be relieved and delighted to know that things are as busy as ever they were. I've just rushed out of playing for one of the classes of the Gun Cup. It is the woodwind competition today. We started at 1:30 today. It's been solid since then, 3 till 6:30. Quick break for chapel, and then the evening competition starts at 8. And it's been absolutely brilliant. It's the first competition. Sorry, it's the second competition in the new Silk Hall, revamped Silk Hall, the new music school. We had the drum prize yesterday, which was an entirely different but equally exciting occasion. And we've got the Hudson String Prize on Thursday. So we opened 2 weeks ago. The music school opened, and we thought we were opening at Christmas, and so we thought that by early February we'd be safely in and settled, so it wasn't too mad to have the competitions that have been waiting so long to be in the new hall. And instead we found ourselves very excitingly with 3 competitions in 1 week, and some builders still finishing bits and pieces off. So it's been a really exciting week, but I think the best thing about the last week or two has been Sundays and evenings and early mornings when there hasn't been a practice room free. Even though we've got lots more practice rooms, the boys have been so genuinely and uninhibitedly excited about the building, about music, that they've been practicing at every spare moment, which is exactly what we wanted. Obviously it's our job now to sustain that, but the building has already served its purpose in really exciting lots and lots of boys about making music. So that's been a really a wonderful, and I think it's got us through what's been a really tricky month. As you can imagine, moving house is bad enough. Moving department, we've had 4 terms camping in the old subwarden's house and in various mansion rooms and porter cabins, and then getting everything back from there into the music school. And I think there was an 8-page snagging list a week ago. It's down to, I think, 4.5 pages. We're gradually whittling away to get bits and pieces fixed. So hopefully by the time we get to our big opening events in March, we will have a fully functioning and beautifully looking finished building to enjoy as well.
Thank you. Wasn't one of the big things that you did last week the music flood with primary schools?
It was, yeah. So our very first event was on Monday last week. So we, as Radley has forever, we've been closely involved with pupils, children around the whole area, and the work in care homes and so on has continued as well. But we've got a wonderful network of primary schools now, 14 primary schools, basically all of the primary schools in our postcode, and all the secondary schools as well, who work together pretty much every week. The boys are involved making music alongside children from other schools, in addition, of course, to the chorusship scheme, which endures and thrives. And so on Monday, we had 300 musicians in Silk Hall, which I think probably broke most of the fire regulations that aren't quite yet written for the new building. Absolutely packed with musicians. And that basically is it's twice a year. We work in all the local primary schools supporting instrumental ensembles in those schools alongside a local charity. And our boys, alongside children from local secondary schools, are kind of mentors for some of the primary school children, play alongside them. And then we all come together with bespoke arrangements to perform as a mass orchestra together for a whole workshop day twice a year. We actually, in the summer, ended up at Birmingham Symphony Hall to perform as part of Music for Youth with them. But it's a really wonderful programme, and obviously it's great for the children who maybe don't have an orchestra in their school to be playing, but it's also brilliant for our pupils, and particularly there's a lovely boy called William who is in A Social. He's a shell in A Social, who isn't the most confident musician, but we put him in with the recorders, and he ended up basically running a sectional rehearsal and was buzzing about it afterwards and so excited about music. So actually it's often has as much impact or more impact on our pupils as those who ostensibly we're there to support. But it's become so popular that the secondary schools now have an issue in that so many children are coming through playing instruments now where they perhaps didn't do before. And we've seen a double the number of people playing instruments in quite a few of our primary schools locally. And there's now an intermediate Abingdon orchestra joining, which started this year to cater for them. So that's it's been really exciting. It grew from very little and has turned into a really exciting project.
Yes, I believe you also take over Abingdon Market Square occasionally and
yeah, we do
play it open air.
Yeah, we do. We have a week in September where we do lots of assemblies and things in local schools. It's a great way for our boys to start off with an informal performance opportunity in week 2 of the term of the school year. But we have an ensemble on residence and then do a big performance in the marketplace at the end of the week. Pack it full with kind of 600 odd children and teenagers performing and singing and enjoying music together. Just for all of us, really, just to have a really positive, happy start to the year, and tee everyone up for part song and so on coming up just a few weeks after that.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Sam. We'll let you go because we know that you've got a massive amount of stuff to do this evening.
Brilliant.
But thank you very much for joining us.
It would be wonderful to have anyone who'd like to come and visit and have a look around the building. You are very, very welcome. You'll recognise bits. There's a couple of the staircases are just as you'll remember them, and the Silk Hall sort of feels like the Silk Hall, but then is slightly different as well. So that's quite exciting. But there are some lovely events coming up. But it'll be really lovely to connect with people and show you around. I think you'll be really, really delighted with what has been achieved in the building.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam.
I'll head off. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.
Right, bye. So We also have the contribution to music. We've got Warden Ferguson as a hymn writer, and we're still singing hymns that he wrote the tunes for. So Ladywell, written for All Hail the Power of Jesus' Name. Wolvercote, written for Oh Jesus, I Have Promised. So we also have settings by Robert Gower, as you know, Tim Morris, and various others. So there's been that long tradition of hymn writing and choral music, and culminating now in the choristers. But there's also the informal side of music. And this is one of the really interesting points that I'd like to explore further as a piece of research. Because in 1848, Singleton said the boys came to him and they asked permission to form a brass band. And basically, they go out, they buy their own instruments, they set themselves up. And he says, it's getting on quite well. In fact, they'll soon produce music, which will be quite pleasing to listen to. So he's really quite believing that they're actually, although they're only practicing for half an hour a day in 1848. And recently I was looking through the inventories of the school for actually a completely different inquiry, and the 1850s inventories, and it's revealed there that William Sewell actually had a chamber organ in his rooms. So music was absolutely central. But what Singleton says is that music is turning out to be quite a tool of education. And what I'm interested in here is the role of that as an education for boys, because we're very used to 19th century girls' accomplishments. They should be playing the harp or the piano and so on. But actually the role that music played for boys is quite something that I'm not sure is really being explored. But here we are with the band in 1863. Strings, clarinets, trumpets, bass. So it's clearly a mixed band. And this is my favorite music image, actually, of all time for Radley College, where you've got the boys here, a couple of the prefects with the silver tassels on their mortarboards, a couple of juniors also in mortarboards, because at that time that they were wearing them, couple of dons, and obviously a Radley dog in the central place of the whole thing. You've actually got to have him, and I really absolutely love the button boots that they're wearing as well. So that is one of our really early pictures, and it really encapsulates all that music means here, which is that combination of boys and dons making music together as equals, which we see a lot of the time. Just contemporary image, which shows the development of music. So we've now got the bagpipe competition. I believe it became the largest bagpipe competition in the south of England. But we've also got one of the boys over here who actually created a lute for his Duke of Edinburgh. So he was actually making instruments and so on. So we've had an awful lot of things which have gone on over the years by way of that informal music. Wharton introduced a lot of quite contemporary music. He gets a kind of bad press as being somebody, but because he was in post for so very long, he was there from 1862 in post to 1914. And such a long tenure. The suggestion always in the history was that he stultified music. But actually, he was doing things like The Dream of Gerontius. He played as an organ voluntary in 1907. It had been written in 1900. There are other quotes of music that he was introducing. There was a lovely write-up. There were so many concerts which are recorded and so many performances. So there's a concert here in 1866, which is Haydn's first Mass. but it finishes with that great work, Beethoven's Hallelujah Chorus. And the whole performance, from beginning to end, was most successful, in spite of the difficulties which attended it being got up. I would suggest that we ought to put that as one of the works in our in the opening concert, because obviously it's not heard very often, Beethoven's Hallelujah Chorus. But what Wharton did do was that he appointed George Butterworth. George Butterworth was appointed purely as a music teacher. He was here for barely a year. But while he was here, he really influenced the school and influenced the direction that music took after his time. He probably composed quite a large amount of the Shropshire Lad Suite from his house down in the lodge. And in 2016, we commemorated the Battle of the Somme and his death on the Somme with a whole day of music in which every piece of Butterworth's music was played in Radley, including some which came from manuscripts in the Bodleian. And recently I played a piece to a group of boys and didn't tell them what it was. I just asked them, close their eyes, listen to the music, and tell me what it describes. And basically one of them just looked out of the window and said, "It's here. It describes where we are. It's willows on the river," and so on. Just part of that suite. Part of the commemoration, part of the celebration of the opening of the Silk Hall was this wonderful memorial which Robert Gower organised with Lawrence Whistler. Robert did write to us and sort of pointed out that Whistler designed this in about a week. And it has all those elements of a broken life in the broken glass, the cherry tree, views of Eton, views of the Thiepval Memorial, and musical phrases from the music of the composer. So Butterworth was influenced by the place, but he also influenced the place. And one of the things that he did was that he founded the Choral Society. It hasn't had a continuous life, but we still have a choral society which comes back and forth. So he did influence, he founded the Choral Society. He also happened to be very involved in the Morris Dancing Society. And one of the things that we had was a couple of dons who were very much into that whole revival of folk music, folk dance, Morris dance. And we do have records of the entire school learning sword dances. I'm not sure where that goes with modern health and safety, obviously, but I could suggest it. But one of the things immediately after Wharton left school in 1914 is that that's the point at which the Musical Society is founded. And we have continuous record of the minutes of the Music Society from 1915 onwards. In 1916, they played Butterworth's songs. So they were completely up to date in music. In that first year, actually, one of the things that they played, there was music by Debussy, Purcell, Ravel, Gluck, Mozart, César Franck, Beethoven, Brahms, Schubert, Schumann, Haydn, Scriabin, Tomé, Satie, and Vaughan Williams, all performed during the first year of the life of that musical society. So they're really looking at contemporary music, but they're also beginning to look back to early modern music with Purcell and so on. So it's a really eclectic mix, but actually very much of the moment of what music is being played at any one point. The next year, they're actually playing Night in May by the Finnish composer Palmgren, which is absolutely of the minute, alongside songs by Thomas Campion. What they were limited by was the instruments they had to hand and the players that they had to hand. So they could, they couldn't at the time. They didn't have enough people in the school to maintain a full orchestra. It was bands, but it's bringing in the entire community to play and be part of it. So if you look at that list of members, you've got B.C. Jones Esquire, one of the teachers, the Reverend F.J. Stone, he was the science teacher and B social tutor, and Miss Pattenden. You've got family members of Dons, and you've got some of the matrons taking part in the music society. So it's that whole idea that music is for everyone, and everybody is taking part in it, producing it. So we're thinking about different types of music. We had the military band. The first record I have, I don't know when they were founded, but I know they were being trained by Colour Sergeant Parmentier in 1914. And this is the photo of them playing at the dedication of the War Memorial of Montmartre in 1922. And then we've got them here being drawn by Brian de Grino in his wonderful series of illustrations for the Illustrated London News in 1947. Again, part of the Second World War Memorial going on. But we've also got here, many of you will know that Eastbourne College were evacuated to Radley, and they shared the what was then the Junior Training Corps, now the CCF. Here is Eastbourne marching through Abingdon, and here is Radley CCF in 1958, photograph sent to us by Jock Mallard last week, which I had never seen before. So we've got the military bands, but actually military bands turned into jazz bands. So the bandmaster G.W. Elvin came along in 1924, and he it was who introduced Radley to jazz. Again, very much of the time. He was succeeded by the goat, Eric Gota. Now, I don't know if there's anybody out there. We have Robin Finley who remembered that. Is Robin on the call?
Robin is on the call. I don't know whether he wants to chip in or not.
Would you like to chip in, Robin? Right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
we can hear
we can.
you.
Okay, yes. I was sent to Radley from a prep school in 1954 because I was useless at cricket, and it was somewhere that you could do rowing instead. And I did piano, and Miss Parkinson, who was my piano teacher, for the first term, said, "Now, laddie, you haven't practiced." And I said, "But I have, Miss Parkinson." And she said, "Half an hour a day, I expect, laddie." And I said, "Miss Parkinson, half an hour a day does not exist in my life at Radley, and for practicing the piano." And at the end of the term, I said, "I've had enough of Miss Parkinson. I want to play a wind instrument. I'd like to do the clarinet." And I was sent to the goat, Mr. Gota, who was a Royal Marine bandmaster, and he gave me a couple of lessons on the clarinet, and he said, "Now, John," I said, "I'm not John, I'm Robin. Now, John, I think you should do the French horn because you've got quite a good ear. And there are 17 clarinetists in the school and only one horn player." So I became a horn player, and it gave me a lot of pleasure for at least half of my life so far. And so thank you, the goat, and Mr. Caesar and all the rest. That's me left as a horn player in orchestra and chamber music. I think that's it. Yep.
So you've continued playing the horn after
Yes.
Radley?
Oh, definitely, yes. The last time I played with some people in the village we live in near Bath, and we did a piece by Schubert for horn, piano, and either soprano or tenor voice, called Auf dem Strom, on the river. and at the end of it, the excellent keyboard player said, you got about 85% of the right notes. And I thought, well, it's probably time to put the horn in the attic, which I did. But it gave me a great deal of pleasure over many years. And so thank you very much, and particularly to the goat. But I also mentioned Michael Bawtry. I don't know whether you're going to get to him.
Yes, we will get to Michael Bawtry. But it was Eric Gota that I wanted to hear about. Yeah,
a very good egg was the goat. And he taught everything from the piccolo to the tuba. You know, he was the wind teacher. And he said, diaphragmatical breathing, that's what you've got to do. And it was something that very few people actually achieved, I think. But he was a very excellent man, and I much gratefulness to him.
Thank you very much. Yes, I will be mentioning both Ronan Parkinson and Michael Bawtry as we go along a little. So we're looking at a new music school, and one of the key things has been where music should be played and can be played. This is a well-known Radley photograph. This is between chapels, this moment where the choir actually went and processed out to the old gym site, and services were held in the old gym for a very short time while the old chapel was being demolished and the new one hadn't yet been consecrated. But around about the same time in the 1890s, Radley had very shortly before actually taken possession of the site. Up until 1883, we were simply renting and really should not have been building anything on rented land, which wasn't ours, and we could be moved out at any point. 1883, there was an auction, and the site and the mansion were actually bought by a local landowner, Josephine Docker Drysdale, but she sold the land specifically around the school itself to Radley. Not necessarily all of one another playing fields and the woods. We've acquired those over time. But at this point, they also did build what they called a music school. And I believe it was probably somewhere down Covered Passage. But I have absolutely no photographs of it. Nothing that identifies where it is on site. So clearly it was temporary. But then we ended up with the obvious combination of music school and armory, which was designed by the school's own architects, Merriman and Nat Fisher, in 1927. Keep your eye on this window at the end of the music school. You will see it again. And this roof line here on the end. Originally, the idea was that at the end of this, there would be a speech hall. And one of the paintings that I've recently hung in Covered Passage is the architect's sketch for that speech hall. But there was music in one half of it, armory in the other, and actually the attics were given over to the Natural History Society for a natural history museum with all of their exhibition and collections in. So a multi-purpose building that went up in 1927. But you'll notice it has no concert hall. So concerts, and anyone who'd like to chip in with a memory of playing concerts in hall or playing concerts in what is now the library with the linen fold there. In fact,
I'll have a go if any good to you, Claire.
Yes, thank you,
Charles
Charles.
Stokes here.
Yep.
I played in we had two orchestras in the 60s, originally senior orchestra and junior orchestra, then first and second orchestra as egalitarianism spread itself. And Donald Payne, who was absolutely wonderful. This was the overture to the Master Singers, which is quite a difficult piece to play. As a first violin, there's 16 notes in each bar, and as a first trumpet, there's 4 notes in each bar, and the trumpets wanted to play it quickly. And getting 4 notes to every one is quite difficult. And so we had enormous battles between the trumpets and the violins trying to get the tempo right. And eventually Donald Payne looked at the brass witheringly and said, "I'm looking at you, but a conductor will never look encouragingly at the brass." And that was quite fun. We also gave this concert at Gaudi, And of course, when it was a wet Gaudi, everybody, interested or not, came into hall to listen to the concerts. And in the old tradition of 18th century concerts, wouldn't shut up during the music because they didn't hear it right at the back of the hall. So it was an interesting time, but a very high standard of playing, a very high standard of music, and lots of very good boys soloists. I can think of David Bradbury, Peter Stanger, Richard Deacon earlier on, of course, and so on. And it was a wonderful time for the orchestra. It really was.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Charles. It was really good to hear that. So they're in the old school. With this wonderful quote from Chantal Stewart, who is in Strasbourg, and I don't know if Chantal has made it into the call today. But here we are in a wooden hut, basically stuck out by the college food gardens with a wood-burning stove to keep warm, but still an experience that starts them off. These wooden huts seem to have been places of immense creativity. When I've looked into the history of art, we've got potters in huts stuck out in goodness knows where. We've got astronomers out in tents disguised as observatories. All sorts of things going on in huts around the buildings. So I really like this one, and I really like that Chantal wants to say thank you to whoever gave them that practice hut, which again led to a lifetime of music. We've got a little bit of a hippie era, a poetry and folk concert just lying out on the grass in the grounds, which we've tried occasionally as well. Oberon, I believe, was recently found on YouTube. Sophie, is that we found Oberon somewhere?
I don't remember that, but I hope that's the case. That would be marvelous. Further research needed.
Can I have a word? Jeremy Birchall here. Good evening, everybody. I was actually in Oberon, although I wasn't. Can you hear me? By
Yes, we can.
Great. The photo you see there was a summer concert with some poetry, and that was the format. And Donald Payne was very encouraging of it, and it was mainly some people from G Social, people like Charlie Seaward, Nick Powell, Chris Smith, who unfortunately isn't with us anymore, and a guy called Julian Smedley, a very good violinist. I didn't actually go to that gig, but they did another one in school, as it was called, I think a couple of terms later. And I not only heard that, but I recorded it. And I was so impressed that I thought I had to be part of this band. And I somehow taught myself into being a bass player with the band when they made an album at the very end of the summer term in 1971, I think it was. It was extraordinary. We made this album in one day. I think we practiced for it for the week after we finished at school. Well, most of us had finished altogether, and we somehow stayed on at the school for an extra week, practiced and made this album. And then sort of forgot about it. They made 100 copies because, or was it 99 copies? Because if you made 100, you'd have to pay purchase tax. And basically, I think it was Nick Powell, who was staying on for the following year, sold all his, well, he sold a number of copies to other people in the school, but obviously didn't sell all of them. And then we all forgot about it. And then, do you mind if I continue the story?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
In the 90s, I have to also add that I was mainly a keyboard player and a viola player. I was actually in the picture of the orchestra you showed in Hall with Donald Payne conducting 2 or 3 minutes ago. And so I was mainly that sort of thing. I'd never played the bass guitar before. I didn't play the guitar, so I learnt the bass guitar in a fortnight to play on this album. And I went up to one of the guys drove me up to London to buy an amplifier, and we did all that. And just to return, we made this album, and I thought it sounded absolutely excellent. There were some very good musicians. There was I was a music scholar, and one or two other people in the band were also music scholars. And as I say, but this was made in 1971, and sometime in the 90s, I received a phone call from somebody I didn't know. The phone rang, and they said, hello, were you a member of this band called Oberon? And I said, yes, why? And they said, well, have you got any albums in your attic? And I said, no, why? And they said, well, actually, it's worth quite a lot of money. And that was the end of that little bit. And then about, I suppose, another 10 or 15 years later, I'd met up with Nick Powell, who was our drummer, and he assured me that by this time eBay was going strong, and people had paid over £1,000 for a copy of our record. It'd become a rare vinyl, and it was praised in the press for its extraordinary quality. And obviously the people that collected these things were prepared to pay a lot of money, and it wasn't just one that sold for £1,000. There were quite a lot. So I was very proud of that. And eventually I sold. I managed to get my brother, who was also at the school, Simon Birchall, his name is. He sort of gave me his copy because he said he didn't want it anymore, and I said I'd split the proceeds if we sold it. So I did, and I sold it to a guy who made rare vinyls, and we made another rare vinyl of the concert that you see advertised on your screen, which was in school on March the, what does it say, 28th, and that was 1971. And I stuck a microphone up. I was very keen on recording at the time, and recorded the whole gig on one microphone. And then I rediscovered that when I was looking out all my old vinyls, and we reissued that with the help of this guy who had all the contacts. And we made 40 copies of that for the band's 40th anniversary. So I think you've heard enough of me.
Well, the one place that doesn't have copies of either is Radley College Archives. So if anything were coming this way, that would be very good.
I'm pretty sure that Nick Powell actually did give you some copies, actually, or a copy of the new one. Anyway, the one that was issued in 2011.
Right. It's possibly then tucked away in the material that came from Tony Money that still hasn't yet been sorted. So hopefully it's there.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully. Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. So then we came to actually having a concert hall, which was the Silk Hall, designed a great deal by Robert Gower, named in honor of Dennis Silk, and finally a concert hall. But taking music elsewhere, these are the scan tours, which to my mind are absolutely astonishing. These combined gymnasts and orchestra tours organized by Bob Stoughton Harris. I know, Charles, you were on these. You've talked about them.
I did, yes. Should I share a few words about them?
Yes, please do.
Well, first of all, of course, gymnasium is a European generic word for school, not where you do gym, which caused some confusion originally. But for some reason, gymnasts and music went together under Bob Stoughton Harris, who did gym, and Donald Payne. And we gave concerts. And a wonderful thing was said by the principal of the gymnasium in Copenhagen, Radley, you won in the gym last night, and tonight in the concert hall, you win again, which was rather nice. And Sir Roderick Sarell, whose boy William was Radley at the time, threw a wonderful party for us. And we sang there. And we had the Carols for Choirs book, which we handed over to them, which they seemed to like very much. It was also great fun. We used to go to nightclubs with the boys and girls, which was great. We walked through the snow, and each boy stayed with the Danish family, which was very instructive and helpful. One slight embarrassment, a friend of mine, a year younger, is no longer with us, Hilary Clifford Brown, his name was thought to be that of a woman, and so he stayed with the charming Danish girl in her family, which was, of course, quite a bit of palaver, but I think he made the best of it. Yes, so it was. It went on for it was good fun. One final trivial point: we didn't know what the Danish word was for lavatory, and so we said we want to wash our hands because he was very polite about that, and they had no clue what we're talking about and talked about. And when you got the joke that yes, our hands are very dirty, it's that way, Charles. But that's enough of that. Yes, it was great fun. Great fun. And this time I think Radley was being very enterprising about music. We were giving concerts outside the college. We were mixing with local girls' schools for singing and orchestra playing. And it was an enlightened approach and some fairly challenging times for the college.
That's lovely. Yes, I do have photographs of the gymnasts as well. So we could see those and add them in. The competition. Yes. Community action, we've also talked about a little bit, going out into the world. This is still happening as part of partnerships, but it goes back formally into the 1980s and earlier into the 1970s, a continuous stream of taking music out to the housebound, to schools as well. So very much an ongoing thing that we do with music. We take it out. Michael Bawtry, Robin talked about earlier. Black and White Blues is available also on the digital archive alongside Jazz 3 and Monday at Mandolinos also. So there are various things there which you can listen to. So it is possible. Michael Bawtry gave us the copyright permission because the music was his. Again, very much case that Dons take part in everything. John Pound, Man About Pounds, well known as bass player. This is a Dons review with Will Matthews, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. Fabulous bass player again. With Andrew Reeks, this was his moment when he did "Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick." There is a recording of it. It's quite a moment. And a lovely moment when the entire chemistry department proved that to be a scientist is also to be a musician. So we had keyboard, cellist, sax player, trumpeter, all performing. And halfway through his performance, they actually put down the instruments and picked up all the tools of chemistry and played those as well. So in exactly the same way as they were playing their instruments. So the fact that Dons are taking part in the fun of music is very much part of Radley life and has been. Hugo language has been spoken of a great deal. Is David Noble here, or anybody who would like to speak about Hugo? This is Hugo with the marionettes.
It's quick, slightly naughty, in a friendly way about Hugo. He was super. He kept saying he was perfectly happy to be music centre, though we rather envied Donald conducting all the concerts. And he was not a tall man. And to see him walking to the music school carrying a double bass on his shoulder was really a sight to be seen.
Oddly enough, I was in Martock Parish Church just this afternoon, and that's where Hugo retired back into Somerset and played organ there. So that's a lovely coincidence.
Seeing the time, yes. So Broadcasts and recordings. The first outside broadcast was 1956, Anthony Caesar's choir, school singing, plain chant. That again, you can listen to. And there's a wonderful record. The first time somebody brought a phonograph to Radley in 1896, they recorded the choir. That sadly is something that I do not have. But recording has long been something that we do and we make a point of and broadcasting. And you were talking about working with girls, and I thought this quotation was absolutely fabulous. His battle between the boys, gave it all the machismo we could in the tenors, left the girls wilting. Really, Charles. But Donald Payne with Chomo there, and again, Chomo, tiny, well-known figures in Radley music are the Dogs and Donald Payne's Dogs. This is a recording also that we don't have, and I know that John Gamage is here on the call. Donald may have had what he called the last known copy of this, but I certainly have, again, don't think that we have it in the collection, and it would be really wonderful. Richard Deakin there as a violin soloist. We've had Moritz Silem, and we have Dusek. We have a huge number of professional musicians who've come from the school and gone on. John Lubbock, I know, John, you're on the call, and have had a career in music as a conductor. Would you like to talk about what you do with music? John?
Are you calling John Gamage or John Lubbock?
John Lubbock or John Gamage, or both. Both.
Well, look, I just want to show you my clarinet that I bought from John Lubbock in 1962. Still got it, still works. Replaced a few pads and things. But my mouth has sort of changed shape these days, and it doesn't play so well. But I just wanted to talk about that recording. That I think there was only one disc made. We went into some studio in Oxford to make that recording. Obviously, except the Lark Ascending was recorded in chapel. I had a copy of it on tape once, and I can't find those tapes anymore. So that's sad. I'm still in touch with Richard Deakin, but I'd also just curiously like to hear my voice as a treble again, if that could be found. But I've no idea how Donald Payne's house was cleared out after he died. But I'd just like to say what a huge effect Donald had on my life at Radley.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, of course, I knew Richard very well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
He was the leader of my orchestra when I started it in 1967, and led it for many, many years, and then went up to Manchester with Emma and taught at the college. So, but there were lots of good musicians. Colin Kitchen was a very good viola player. Ollie Butterworth I knew at the academy. So plenty of musicians in the profession from Radley.
Thank you, John and John, for that.
Claire, forgive me, I'm probably contributing too much to this section, but Richard Deakin played the Lark Ascending at Dorchester Abbey in about 64 or 65, I think, and it's the first time I'd heard the work, and it absolutely transformed me, and although it's very popular now, it's the first time I've heard it. And John Lubbock, did you sing Ich habe genug by Bach, or was that someone else, forgive me, at Dorchester at the same time as well, I wonder?
I think that was me.
It was wonderful. It was, again, very, very moving. Thank you, John, 60 years ago for that.
And the very first group that I started was actually a string quartet, an oboe, and me as a baritone and a harpsichord. So I did that Ich habe gedug many, many, many times.
Marvelous, marvelous.
Thank you. The other person who's been mentioned is Rona Parkinson, as the violin teacher. And I know, John Brigcutt, you've spoken to me quite often about the rivalry between Rona Parkinson and Violet Blofeld. Is John there?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, he is there. Forgive me.
So John Brigcutt or John Lubbock, whoever would like to speak up.
Well, of course, I knew Blofeld very well. I didn't really know Rona because I was a clarinetist, so I had the wonderful goat, who was absolutely brilliant man. And I loved my lessons with him.
Right.
I had Rona and Violet for a year, and then piano and violin competed. And I stayed with the violin because I didn't have a chance to play in an orchestra, and it only had one stave rather than two staves, which was rather harder playing the piano. And yes, Rona was a tiger for practice. She'd be staring over the practice book as you came up the stairs, realizing how little practice you'd actually done. But she was lovely. She was lovely.
Well, one of the things that Rona did was that she left her estate to Radley for the use of music. And I know that Anthony Williams has used that money a great deal for buying our fabulous piano collection. And one of the big things that was put together by John Madden is the piano extravaganza, basically trying to get every pianist in the school playing at once all of the pianos in action. Some astonishing concerts that have gone on there with the extravaganzas. And we come to 2026. So we thought we'd just show you a couple of images of the new music school to finish up. You recognize the window. This is still that window from 1927, the Merriman and Knapp Fisher building. And the Silk Hall has been revamped, reorganized as a concert hall, but is still there as the concert hall. So we're going to stop there. Unless anybody else has anything they would like to contribute. If you've got memories that you'd like to write down and send to us, we're compiling them into a collection. This recording will be edited a little to tidy it up, and will probably be out and available on our YouTube channel within a very short time, within a few days. But thank you all for contributing to this history of music. It's really, really good to hear what the effect has been on individuals as they've taken music through their lives. And so thank you so much. Over to you, Sophie, to finish us off.
Thank you so much, Claire. That was absolutely wonderful, fascinating stuff. And as always, it's very much the contributions of everyone else on the call which really make the conversation as well. So thank you for that. As Claire said, we will continue to collect together your stories and your memories and things. So please do send them in, and we'll add them to the collection that we've already started. And that's hugely valuable as a resource for the future. So thank you all for joining us this evening. I hope you all found it really interesting. I know I certainly did. Just to reiterate, if you do have a chance to come to Radley to see a concert in the new building, it's really magnificent and you would be very welcome. Our next archive event talk will take place in May, and it's going to focus on partnerships, philanthropy and community action. So if you took part in what used to be called social services or partnerships or charity work while you were at the college, we would absolutely love to hear from you over the next month or two while we start to collect together those memories and stories as well. So please do email us if you have any reflections or memories to share on those topics. But thank you all so much for coming, and lovely to see so many familiar faces. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much. Lots of waving. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye. Bye.